Welcome, Pewter Report readers, viewers, and listeners to a brand new edition of the Pewter Report podcast. It's our second episode of the week, but it is a Wednesday because, again, Monday was the 4th of July, and I hope everyone had a happy Independence Day. Oh, I got my YouTube going. Anyway, I'm your host, Matt Matera. Joined with me is JC Allen. JC, how you doing today?
I'm doing really well. Nice long weekend, trying to, just pick up the slack at work in a short work week. But my day got instantaneously better once we found out the news that the Bucs would be playing Mr. Baker Mayfield twice a year with the Carolina Panthers. So, bring Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, Matt Corral, PJ Watt, bring whoever you want. It's two quick, easy wins for the Bucs this year, I think.
Yeah. And of course, as everyone saw on the caption, we're going to be talking about whether or not the Bucs should sign Odell Beckham Jr., who, of course, was teammates with Baker Mayfield. But the news broke about, the show starts at 4 o'clock. This news broke about around, I don't know, like 1 o'clock, something along those lines, maybe even a little bit earlier than that. So, of course, if it affects the Bucs, if things are going to impact your favorite team, your Tampa Bay Buccaneers, we are going to talk about it. And man, it's funny to think, JC, that the Carolina Panthers have the first and third overall picks from the 2018 NFL draft. It just so happens that they play the same position, so only one of them can be on the field at the same time because they're not a wildcat type of team. It's not like one of these quarterbacks was a former running back or wide receiver that can play multiple positions. So the Panthers have Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold playing the same position. It's going to be a QB battle in training camp for the Panthers. And Matt Corral, of course, is in there as well. They drafted him in the 3rd round. So Panthers, yeah, you know what? Before I go with the Panthers, I got to give the Browns, and I can't believe I'm saying this, I got to give the Browns a small, tiny little bit of credit. They deserve a lot of the blame and the ridicule for the Deshaun Watson signing and everything that's gone on with that, with all the cases and allegations and whether or not he'll be suspended. But after they made that deal, it was clear and obvious that Baker Mayfield was not going to play for the Browns. Even if Deshaun Watson got suspended, there's no way they could just go tail between their legs being like, hey, Baker, I know we're ready to ship you out of town, but we could really use you for like 6 or 7 games. You want to
Right.
you want to run it back and go and do that? So the Browns don't deserve any credit for that. The part that I will give them a little, hey, you did okay here, was the fact that, Baker's money was guaranteed and they knew they had to ship him. So the fact that they were at least able to get a draft pick back, they got a 5th round pick that could turn into a 4th round pick, depending on the playing time that Baker Mayfield will get with the Panthers this year. The fact that they were able to get the Panthers to pay a little bit of money, and they're still spending a significant amount of it, knowing that, their hands were tied, they at least got something out of it. From the Panthers' perspective, I don't know. I mean, go ahead, JC. I still need to marinate on this.
Even from Baker wanted out of that situation so bad he gave up $3.5 million of his own salary that if he doesn't have a great season, who knows if he'll get that somewhere else next year on the open market. So he is betting on himself as well with the Carolina Panthers organization under Matt Rule that hasn't really done a great job at cultivating quarterbacks. I mean, you look at just what they've tried to do, what they've been doing since Matt Rule took over, trying to cheat the system and get someone's old trash and turn it into treasure. When they had high draft picks, multiple years too. I mean, they've had multiple high draft picks, and instead they chose to go for the route with, at first it was Teddy Bridgewater, then it was trading for Sam Darnold, then it was trading Teddy Bridgewater, then it was, signing Matt Barkley, and then Cam Newton came back, and then they benched Newton, they cut Barkley, they re-signed PJ Walker, drafted Corral, and now they trade for Baker Mayfield, all since 2018, 2019 was since he became the coach. It's insane what they've done over there. And they've had high draft picks to be able to actually go out and get a quarterback or have the ability to trade up for a quarterback. I mean, they picked 7th, 8th, 6th. They knew they needed a quarterback, and they just decided to, hey, I don't want to groom a guy. Let's just go out and sign a bunch of trashy veterans and see if we can turn them into diamonds. And it doesn't look like it's going to happen either.
Right. It sounds like the Panthers have taken a lot of half measures, and especially too when you go into the situation where you have two guys from the same exact draft, only one of them can play, and they're both on the last year of their deal. So there's a chance that neither guy is back next season, and then you're just stuck with Corral. And of course, we all talked about that this year's draft class was not good for quarterbacks, and next year's is going to be so much better. So why not just wait another year? Here's where I do understand the move, though, is because Matt Rule doesn't have too many options. He's had a lot of losing seasons, and I don't think he can afford to have another. And this is what I talk about a lot with, and I understand it in the NFL and in the world we live in. It's all about right now. No one has patience. It's now, now, now. I want this now. We need to go do this. We need to go do that. This needs to happen now. And it's very difficult to sell. And I'm talking about, in this case, the NFL. If you're talking to a GM or ownership, it's very tough to sell to the higher ups of, hey, it's going to be tough sledding for a year or two, but let us create a foundation and then go from there. And all we need is that quarterback. And then we can, really take liftoff and compete for the division and the playoffs and maybe make a Super Bowl. I think Matt Rule is a solid coach, but at the end of the day, you still need that quarterback. And I don't know if he never really had it at the NFL level, as you went through chronological order of all the quarterbacks that the Panthers have had in recent years. But I do think, and I understand it's college compared to the NFL, I do think that Rule has done a great job going from a couple of different organizations that were either losing or had a lot of turmoil around them, and he was able to, build them up and make them into, I'm not going to say a powerhouse, but a competitive team that could play in significant bowl games. And so he goes to Carolina. It's the same thing where he doesn't have a quarterback. You're in a tough division playing against who at the time, the Saints were a tough team up until last year. And then you're finally done with the Saints and the Bucs come along and they get Tom Brady. And now, they're running the division for at least as long as Tom Brady gets there. So when it comes to Baker, and they already went through the ringer with Sam Darnold, for Matt Rule, it's like, well, I don't have a choice because I either have to mold this third round quarterback that is already not even the first quarterback taken off of the board of a very bad quarterback class, or you're going to go with Baker Mayfield, who has had some glimpses of success. And last year, obviously, was a dumpster fire, but I think that was more just the Cleveland Browns in total, not necessarily Baker. Like, Baker played through a very significant injury last season.
Right. And that's the thing. And as, Joel points out, whatever happens, they definitely got an upgrade at quarterback. I think Baker is an upgrade over Sam Darnold, but I still don't view Baker as he's not someone who's going to transcend the direction of the team. You have to have the team around him, and not just the team, like the team on defense around him, in order for, I think, them to even have a real shot at making a true noise, in the league and a path to the Super Bowl. I mean, he had a great defense around him last year and with the Broncos, and a really good running game, really good offensive line. And it's still, I know he's playing with injuries, and you saw it in 2020 where they had a better season. But I'm curious to know what his wins above replacement is, because I'm sure it's not that great, because I don't think he turns them in contenders. Is he good for maybe an extra win or two with Carolina? Now, if they have a competent quarterback back there, and if you can even call Baker competent, maybe, but I just don't see a huge stretch where Carolina is like, this is it. We got this guy in a 1-year deal, paying him $3.5 million. He's going to be the savior. It's not even they can cut Sam Darnold because he's owed $18.5 million guaranteed. So now you're paying $22 million to two quarterbacks who quite frankly are, and I know some Bucs fans were kind of like, oh, let him come to the Bucs and sit behind Brady for a year and then maybe he can take over. They're still going to have the option if they want to visit Baker Mayfield next year, because I don't think, unless he absolutely blows the league up and is on fire, I don't see a transition or franchise tag in his future. So it's an interesting case. It's another edition of the Panthers trading more assets for a veteran quarterback, and we'll see how it pans out. I'm not too optimistic, but you never know.
I want to make another point or two about Baker Mayfield, but first I do want to talk to everyone about Celsius Fast Brand Energy Bars. Of course, the Pewter Report podcast is energized by Celsius, and one of their other products is their protein bars, their fast brands. And guys, these are great tasting protein bars. You have the white chocolate cookies and cream flavored bar, and also the salted caramel peanut crunch. As Scott Reynolds likes to say, they taste like candy bars. They're a great substitute where, if you're running late and you can't have breakfast, you could have one of these bars. If you want to go to the gym, you want something in your stomach before you start pumping some iron, have these fast brand protein bars. There's 20 grams of protein, excellent taste, and again, variety with Celsius and their products like this protein bar. You could have it on the way to the gym. You could have it as a substitute for dessert if you don't want to have that ice cream or that pie or, whatever's in your fridge or freezer right now. If you want to enhance your dessert with that ice cream, go ahead and take these bars, heat them up in the microwave for a couple of seconds, and then break them up and put them in your ice cream. It helps enhance that dessert as well. So again, variety and flavor, that's all about Celsius and Fast Brand, their protein bar. So make sure you go to Amazon, save $5 in shipping by ordering these on that website. Go to Celsius.com. And like I said, go to Amazon and make your orders, and you could plan them for, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, however long you want it. Just make sure you go and check it out. As I show you here, you got the white chocolate cookies and cream and the salted caramel peanut crunch. That is the fast brands. Now, JC,
I some of those. All right,
yeah, man.
Yeah, we got a delivery to my house, Scott.
Yeah, do it up, Scott. There is. I think you're right, JC, about I don't think Baker Mayfield necessarily, like, they're not getting to the NFC Championship game with Baker Mayfield as the starting quarterback. I do think it is an upgrade above Sam Darnold, and you said it could get them another win. I think it could potentially get them another 2 wins. And I know it's easy to bash on Baker. I'm not really, everyone likes to hop in on, piling up on someone. Right. But, let's remember, like, Baker was on a playoff team 2 seasons ago in 2020, and they won their first game against the Steelers. And I understand that began the decline of Ben Roethlisberger, and maybe we didn't necessarily realize it at the time. That second game against Kansas City, that came right down to the wire. The Browns had the lead for a while until the end, and then Kansas City, came back and won. Now, I understand that Browns team, they are based off of running the football behind a fantastic offensive line and a great running game with Nick Chubb. You had talent there with Odell, who we will talk about later, Jarvis Landry. You had a couple weapons there on offense. And, of course, their defense, when you have Myles Garrett and other guys there, you're going to rely on them. But with that said, I look at Baker at Carolina, and a lot of this has to do with, health and everything like that. But if Christian McCaffrey is healthy, he's one of the best, most prolific running backs in the game, and obviously helps, in the passing game as well. You had DJ Moore, who fantasy-wise, I wish he could score a couple more touchdowns, but, right. He makes a lot of great plays, and you could trust him when you're throwing him the ball. So they have some things there on offense. Defensively, Carolina, pretty solid up front. Obviously, Burns is a threat, and look in the secondary. That's something that they've addressed, this year and the previous seasons, where they've looked to address and get younger in the secondary. So it's one of those things where the Bucs were in the same situation where they put a lot of stock in these young guys, and hopefully they panned out. And for the most part, they have, with like Carlton Davis and Antoine Winfield Jr. and on and on and on. So I'm not saying Carolina is going to be a threat to the Bucs, and we could talk about that in a minute if this really changes anything for Tampa Bay or I guess New Orleans, the top two seeds in as far as the NFC South. But I think you add Baker and you get him healthy, and I know it's a lot to ask to curb the interceptions a little bit because that's been a problem for him. But I think you're getting a gamer, a guy with a chip on his shoulder that if he's playing better than Sam Darnold, and we know that he for the most part is, I could see Carolina again not making the playoffs, but at least being a kind of a thorn in the side of some of their opponents.
See, for me, it all comes down to the addition of Baker it's the wrong direction, right? In my opinion, yeah, maybe he can get you 2 wins. What are they? They're projected 5 wins. They haven't had more than 5 wins since David Tepper bought the team, and what was it, 4 or 5 years ago? So 5 wins, okay. So they get up to 6, 7, maybe even 8 wins. That just took you out of prime position for a draft pick to potentially draft your quarterback of the future. So, I mean, if you're going to make a trade for somebody and you're going to give up capital, I would almost rather have seen them pony up a 3rd round pick. They don't have their own, but they have one coming from the Patriots, and trade that. How funny with that? Trade a Patriots 3rd round pick to San Francisco for Jimmy Garoppolo, because I think he gives you a better chance. They have enough cap space to do it. And you're right, they do have some weapons around them, although they might be losing Robbie Anderson once he's heard the news of Baker coming to town. But I mean, they do have some weapons. They have Terrace Marshall that they drafted last year out of LSU, big, tall wide receiver who made strides towards the end of the year. DJ Moore is one of the most underrated wide receivers in the league. Don't at me. And then Christian McCaffrey, if he's healthy, he's another guy too that can give you some solid playmaking ability. As you mentioned, the defense isn't terrible. I mean, they've got one of the top pass rushers in the league, a very versatile safety in Jeremy Chin and some other young guys. So, I think if I was and that's just it too, right? David Tepper bought the team for a record $2 billion before the Walmart people just are buying the Broncos for like $4 billion. So you want results. You hire this whiz guy, out of college who's supposed to be the next big thing. You bring in the assistant who had LSU, one of the most explosive offenses in Joe Brady as your offensive coordinator. And you're like, okay, we got some big name hires. We got some big name. Let's go for it. And that's a position that I think is trickling down. But in reality, this team is still building blocks away from really becoming what they could be. And, when you have Tom Brady and the Bucs in the division with the stacked roster like this, you have to be thinking long-term, not short-term. And I think this was a short-term fix to a long-term situation. And that's just really the end of what I have to talk about Baker. And until we get into Odell Beckham. It's just so perfect that we're segueing from Baker to Odell. So
yes, we are. And you make a good point, JC. I just one last stat I want to bring up to everyone's attention, just in terms of it most likely sounds like the Bucs are going to be playing against Baker Mayfield twice this season. It could be Sam Darnold. There's going to be the competition. I think most people would bet on Baker Mayfield taking that competition. The Bucs did play against Sam Darnold twice last year in his first season with the Panthers. They played week 16 and week 18. So the third to last game of the season and then the last game of the season. Bucs won both of those games by a combined score of 73-23. Sam Darnold in those 2 games threw for 409 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. He was sacked 6 times, fumbled the ball twice. And again, the Bucs won by a total score 73-23. Baker Mayfield has only played against the Bucs 1 time, understandably so, with him playing in the AFC. That was his rookie year in 2018. The Bucs won 26-23 in overtime on like a long shot field goal from Chandler Catanzaro. In that game, he threw for 215 yards and 2 touchdowns. He fumbled once and was sacked 5 times. So the Bucs have really gotten after these two quarterbacks when it came to playing against them. And I mentioned betting on who's going to win that quarterback competition, the best place to go and place your bets would be with mybookie.ag. Not as much sports going on right now. Football, we still got another month or two before things really get going. But you have golf. You have, I think Wimbledon just finished up, but you have tennis to bet on. The UFC has some great pay-per-views. And of course, there's baseball. And 162 games of a baseball season can feel like a grind to watch, but you can put the excitement back into each and every game with MyBookie. There's run lines, money lines, first inning, no runs, best bet in all of sports, and props galore. Nobody gives you more opportunities to win than MyBookie. Getting started is very simple. Anything that you deposit, MyBookie will match that up to halfway of your deposit. Just make sure you use the promo code Pewter. So if you deposit $1,000, MyBookie will give you a bonus of $500. Whether you're a diehard fan or a newcomer to the sport, there's never been a better time to join the MyBookie family. Go ahead and sign up today using promo code Pewter to secure your first deposit bonus up to $1,000. Whatever you put in, they'll meet you halfway, all the way up to 1,000 buckaroos. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere with mybookie.ag.
Perfect.
All
I got
right.
one more thing on Baker before we transition.
Go for it, man.
Not just Baker, but that whole quarterback room in Carolina. So they're both drafted in 2018, the first and third overall pick, as you mentioned. Since 2018, Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold also lead the league in interceptions, 1 and 2. Baker's thrown 56, Sam Darnold's thrown 52. Combined 108 interceptions since 2018 for the two quarterbacks. Carlton Davis, are you hearing me? Get on the jugs machine. Yeah. Let's go. Let's go. Because you're getting balls thrown to you at some point. We need to come down with them. AWJ, you heard me too.
Yeah, it's funny. I thought Baker's touchdown to interception ratio would be a lot worse than it actually is. I mean, it's not great, but he's thrown for 14,125 yards and 92 touchdowns to the 56 interceptions, as you just mentioned. Has a QB record of 29-30 and has won a game and lost a game in the postseason. And with all of his career touchdowns, not as many went as we expected to. Not as many went to Odell Beckham Jr., who we're now going to talk about. Odell Beckham just won a Super Bowl with the LA Rams. He was playing great in that Super Bowl game until, unfortunately, he got hurt. I believe tore his ACL, and he's now going to be out for quite a while. We all know, as Bucs fans have seen with Chris Godwin, how difficult that is to come back from and how long that surgery is. I do want to give a quick shout out to William Butler. William, thank you so much for the $4.99 super chat. And again,
I've had one of those for a while.
Yeah,
thanks,
everyone in these chats, if you super chat us, we will get to your question and we will make sure that we make it a priority. I know William sent this one over earlier, but we were talking about Baker. But as soon as we start talking about Odell, we got to our guy, Will. And I always appreciate the Hasbulla picture too. He says, sign OBJ, please, in all caps with 2 exclamation points. The early Brady, I'm assuming he's saying early. The earlier Brady can get him knowledgeable on the playbook, the better. And Scott looks like Elon Musk. Salute, fellas. Interesting.
We'll share that.
I think Scott has gotten that before. So very astute observation there from Will. All right, JC, let's get into the Odell conversation. I think there's multiple variables to this because his injury, the depth chart, the big 3 that the Bucs already have, the market for Odell. There's a lot of different moving parts when it comes to him. So
I'm ready for it all.
I've got
your facts
thoughts
to back everything up. So where do you want to start? You want to start contract? You want to start last season? So last season, as we know, Odell, got forces kind of forced his way out of Cleveland. Not really getting, his dad even chimed in, not really getting the adoration from Baker Mayfield that he rightfully wanted. He missed the first 2 games of the season with injury, worked his way back in week 3. And for that stretch of 6 games that he was with the Cleveland Browns, never eclipsed 100 yards, never had more than 5 receptions in a game, and 0 touchdowns. And that's a lot of frustration that has come out. And with the whole situation with Odell even moving on and trying to get out, they couldn't obviously trade him. So they ended up releasing him, and he goes and he signs over with the LA Rams. Now, LA Rams Odell and Browns Odell are 2 different players. I mean, you're talking about a guy who still only had 6 receptions as his high, but we're talking about games, where 81 yards, 77 yards, and a touchdown, both of those games, just contributing and being that steady, piece in an offense that was already loaded with talent.
Yeah.
Robert Woods was still healthy at that point, I believe, when he came over. He got hurt. I believe, quote me if I'm wrong, but I believe he got hurt the game that Odell actually debuted in, I think, but I'm not 100% positive on that. Sorry about that. Should have done my research. But anyway, I mean, he fit right in to that culture and helped propel them to that Super Bowl run. And if you want any more, evidence of that, his numbers in the postseason were amazing. I mean, absolutely on fire. He was starting in that first game against Arizona, 4 for 4. 54 yards and a touchdown. His grade, offensive grade, though, was an 89.9 per PFF. It's the little things that he does as well that don't show up. The next game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 6 of 7, 69 yards. Again, playing a pivotal part in their win. The big game that he had was the NFC Championship against the San Francisco 49ers. 9 receptions on 11 targets, 113 yards. 81 overall offensive grade. In the Super Bowl, obviously, he got injured early on, but he was already cooking. I mean, he had
that touchdown,
52 yards and a touchdown. And if you look at what he graded out overall in the playoffs, it was an 85.7 overall receiving grade, which is pretty damn good compared to his regular season, which was, you combine the two together, and he only ended up with a, 67.8 as he's, went from one situation, which was a negative and wasn't seeing the type of targets and balls he should have in Cleveland somehow with Baker Mayfield there, not the best decision maker. And then as he, started getting into the offense of the Rams, you could see the production tick up until that playoff run, and he was electric. And that's what the Bucs need. They don't need a fourth guy for week 3. They need the guy that's going to be able to take minutes off of guys like Tyler Johnson and whoever else in the playoffs and add a layer of protection if there's an injury.
Yeah, I think Odell deserves a ton of credit because I'll admit I thought that he was done. And I don't mean like his career should be finished, but I was just a little tired of everyone. Like a year or two ago, when we talked about the best wide receivers in the NFL, I think people still kind of put Odell up there. And I was just like, everyone's so in love with the one-handed catch that he made as a rookie with the Giants that it's bought him so much time to the point that like he would still be up there with the elite of the elite. And I understand he played in New York and was just a very marketable guy to begin with. And I was always just like, why? Like his stat, and I understand stats aren't everything, but like he wasn't productive with the Browns in any way. And there's obviously a lot of factors going into that. And then he goes to the Rams and everything changes. He had over 300 yards. That was more than he had with the Browns. And he played in 2 more games, but the 5 touchdowns, as you talked about, like that's a huge jump going from 0 with the Browns last season to 5 touchdowns. And listen, he's not that same receiver that he was with the Giants, but he's still a very formidable wide receiver. So I was wrong about Odell in the sense of like, he's still got more to his game where he can be a productive number 2 receiver. I don't think he could be a number 1 guy anymore. And I also think a lot of the diva wide receiver stuff was really overblown. Like I understand he had some issues with quarterbacks and he wasn't happy that he wasn't getting the ball, but people were comparing him to Antonio Brown. I'm like, that's just stupid and ridiculous. Like compared to off the field stuff, it's not even in the same atmosphere. So like, I understand that he could cause a little headaches here and there, but nothing that Tampa Bay couldn't handle. So I almost felt it was important for people that want Odell that, they can understand that he can play and not be the number one target. Like Cooper Kupp won the Triple Crown for wide receivers last year.
Right.
He's their number one guy. He's their de facto leader. And of course, the Rams had a couple other, great players on that team. So the question of should the Bucs sign Odell Beckham, the answer, if he's healthy, unequivocally is yes. And I think we've learned now, just based on the type of locker room that the Bucs have, with other players that they brought in and players that they currently have on this team, with leaders like Brady and Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, that they could bring in someone like Odell. And it's not a matter of, hey, I need to get the ball. As long as the team is winning, everyone will be okay. And we learned that from Odell, even if it was half a season with the Rams, that he's okay in that type of role too, because they're going to keep winning, and winning just, what's that saying, with all the tides, all the ships move higher when the tides go up. People know what I'm talking about, but it's only better for everyone, including Odell.
And I think Odell too. I mean, you bring up a great point. Those first 3 seasons of his, phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. 1,300 yards, 1,400 yards, 1,300 yards, almost 100 receptions in every one. 12, 13, 10 touchdowns. That 4th year, he broke his ankle, fractured his ankle, and missed the final 11 games of the season. He came back that next year to old man Eli in the last year of his, in that last year of his deal before they drafted Daniel Jones, and he wasn't as effective as a passer, and he missed games there too. He only played in 12 games, still managed 1,000 yards, still managed 77 receptions and 6 touchdowns. And then came the trade to Cleveland. Now, his first season in Cleveland, I think that was the year 2019. That was the Freddie Kitchens era, who's supposed to be a disciple of Bruce Arians, no risk it, no biscuit type offense. He played in 15 of 16. He played in all 16 games, started 16 of them. Still ended up with over 1,000 yards. Touchdowns took a dip, still 77 receptions. And then you go into last year, the following year, it was the first year of the new regime there with Kevin Stefanski, who wanted to focus on running the ball more. Baker missed, over half a season Odell missed over half a season with injuries. And then the S-storm that was last year with Cleveland. And you I don't know if he's lost it, but I think that injury and then the changing of teams and then the changing of offense and the changes of coordinators and all that stuff has kind of slowed down his momentum. But you saw how well he can be utilized by someone who's very creative on offense, which I think Byron Leftwich is, like a Sean McVay, and how he utilized him last year and how he really kind of saved him towards the playoffs. And that's where you saw that major output of production and such a pivotal part on their Super Bowl run. And I think if you're looking at what he could bring to the Bucs, guys, remember, he's not going to be out till probably mid-November, recovering from that ACL tear that he suffered in February. And if we're looking at the timetable, the Bucs just so happen to have a bye week in the middle of November after their Germany trip. So November 14th, they're back in the States, and they're on a bye for a week until they play the Cleveland Browns coming out of the bye. It just lines up so perfectly. I wrote an article about it, and we haven't even gotten into anything about off the field and stuff like that. We're just talking about OBJ and how he can help this team as a midseason signing. We don't know, and Scott said it multiple times on the pod as well. You never know what a player is going to be like after an ACL tear. Sometimes they're right back to where they were, AP style. Sometimes it takes half a season to a year for them to really get back comfortable doing what they're doing. The good news is for Godwin is his was a contact injury, not a non-contact injury.
Yeah.
So with players, sometimes they suffer the non-contact. It can be in their head. Where he was actually dirty hitted by, Nickel Robio? I don't know, some 30 Saints player. But, I think that might help him get back a little bit quicker because he knows it's not so, all right. It wasn't where I planted my foot. It wasn't how I cut. It was being hit. So we'll see. But if he's not ready or there's injuries like there have been the last 2 years, OBJ mid-November sounds great, Matt.
Right. And that's the other side of the coin is the injury history. And he's actually played in a lot more games than I thought. But yeah, you go 2020 season played in only 7 games. And then last year, I don't think you could really fault him for getting hurt in the Super Bowl. It's like the last game of the season. But again, as we talked about, it's going to keep him out for quite a while. So it really comes down to, and it's kind of what we talked about with Julio. And I do want to get your thoughts on Julio, or a lot of people I've seen in the comments are saying OBJ or Julio. Who would you rather have? We can get to that in a moment. But this is kind of what we talked about with Julio, who also has a little bit of an injury history. If Odell comes into this offense, and it wouldn't be until November, as you stated, it's not like he's going to come in and play 90% of the snaps. Okay. He's going to be on a pitch count, even if he wasn't coming off of this injury, because you have the luxury of Mike Evans, one of the best receivers in the game, Russell Gage, an up and coming receiver who I think we haven't seen the best of him yet, given the situation that he was in with Atlanta, and Chris Godwin, who by the time November gets here, hopefully will be back to the Chris Godwin that we all know and love. I look at it as the situation that the Bucs were in last year when everyone went down or left the team, except for like Mike Evans, because the Bucs can't go into this year. And I understand running into that situation again, where your entire position room is hurt, except for the 5th, 6th, and 7th guys. The odds of that happening another time this season, probably not too likely. But I think you have to prepare for it. And if you know you're going to have a lot of production from the 3 guys that I mentioned, the big 3 receivers for the Bucs, you bring in Odell, you could have special packages where Odell's your guy. If Gage has to miss some time, or Godwin, I like Odell, his versatility of being able to line up outside, but also can go into the slot. And let's remember, Odell loves Tom Brady. Like, he gave him those cleats that I think had goat hair on them or something like that, because it was, because he's the GOAT and everything like that. Also want to get to this comment here from Emily when we were talking about Odell or Julio Jones. She said neither. So Emily, please tell us, who do you want as a free agent wide receiver for Tampa Bay Buccaneers? I am very curious for that.
Yeah, if you want
any,
any.
Yeah, that's another one.
I think part of the I think the part of OBJ from New York still lingers him. The whole
exactly
bigger off the field. The trip down to Miami or Cancun, wherever it was. Obviously the whole pizza box situation. Was he doing that? Was he not? There's like so many different like stories. But in Cleveland, he didn't act out really often until he finally had enough. Like, if you're not going to throw me the ball, don't keep me on the team. I don't fault players for asking for trade, requests if they're warranted. And I felt like his was warranted. I mean, I just went over his stats for you guys over that first half of the season.
Yeah.
How the heck is Baker Mayfield? I know they have a great running game and Jarvis Landry, but I mean, how are you not?
He's like best friends with Jarvis Landry. So that's what even made it crazier. Like, he asked for a trade, and Jarvis is like one of his best friends in the world.
But how are you not going to target this dude and throw to him, more than you are? So I don't blame him for that. And then you saw him go to a organization who already has a track record of winning and success, right? They haven't won the Super Bowl before last year, but they had a track record of, being in the conversation, going to the Super Bowl against the Patriots. And he fell right in line. I didn't hear one story about Odell at all last year. So the whole fact that we don't need a diva wide receiver, we don't need this, that, I don't buy into that with Odell anymore. I think he's matured. He's just had a baby. I think that does a lot to mature adults. I mean, we just had on Rashad White, who has a baby who's 10 months old, and the maturity of him. I mean, he's also gone through a hard path to get where he is, but I think having kids helps mature you. I know it helped mature me personally. So I think that will help. And just being in a situation. I mean, I've never heard anyone say OBJ is unstable, Antonio Brown's a different story. I mean, the dude burnt his feet and complained about a helmet. So, I mean, I don't think you've got that
before he ran off the field.
Right. So I don't think you have that situation with Odell. And I think if he was, and the big question is, when do you need that wide receiver, right, Matt? And that's where the Julio Jones comes, because if you want Julio Jones, you're going to have to sign him in training camp at some point, or someone else is probably going to scoop him up. With Odell, you're sitting and you're waiting. He's got to recover. He's highly unlikely he signs with a team before at least the midpoint of October, and that's just to get the playbook and get integrated. So I think if you're weighing those two, you have to put those both into consideration as well, because
absolutely. And that's what I want to talk about next is the contract situation for a player such as Odell, given what he's going through right now and the overall market of it. But you did just mention Rachaad White, and he was on the show yesterday. So I implore everyone listening to this and watching this and everyone in the chat, if you did not watch it yesterday, Scott and JC had an awesome interview with Rachaad White. You guys did a great job. You had so many great answers and just good intel, especially about lining up outside. Obviously, he's a good receiving running back, but lining up out wide or moving into the slot as well. So a lot of great conversation there between you, Scott, and Rachaad White. So please make sure you go and check that out, and make sure you like and subscribe our YouTube channel. It helps with our algorithm. It costs you absolutely nothing. Just lets you know when we have a new episode or new videos. We'll have a lot more of those Rachaad White clips coming up on our YouTube channel very soon. So that's Pewter Report TV. Make sure you like and subscribe. Back to Odell, JC. I was thinking about this right before the show, and I don't even think Odell would go for it. But what if, because here's the issue with Odell, and that he's not going to be available until November, and teams probably won't start looking at him until, around that time. Sure, the Bucs are going to want him for depth purposes. And I hate to say this because I don't want anyone to get injured playing there in the NFL, but there's going to be a team that has one of their top players at wide receiver that gets injured. Or there might be another team that says, hey, we're doing better than we expected. I feel like we're one or two pieces away from making the playoffs and potentially contending for a Super Bowl. Let's get Odell Beckham on our team. It happens every single year, especially with the injuries to key players. So Odell to the Bucs sounds great, but there's other teams out there that could be interested in the services of Odell Beckham as well. So what if they start talking to Odell now? And again, I don't know if he'll go for this, because if he comes back from injury, plays well, he's going to be looking for more money than probably what any team will sign him this year. But what if Tampa Bay floated the idea of, hey, we'll give you the financial security of you'll be on the team this year. We'll give you a contract. We'll sign you to a 2-year deal. So we already have you for next season. Right. So you have the peace of mind that you don't have to worry about finding another team the next season. You already got it there. Now, of course, the flip side of it is, well, if Odell agrees to that deal and then completely blows everyone's mind, it looks like the Odell that was on the Rams last year, well, him signing for what could be just a veteran minimum or something like that, he's going to want a lot more next season and will want that freedom of being able to pick whatever team that he wants. But I'm curious, as we talk about the contracts and the market there, if that would be something. I think the Bucs would totally go for it. I don't necessarily think Odell would.
Right. And I think it's tricky too, because so much depends on who's going to be the quarterback next year. I think the Bucs' biggest selling point is Tom Brady. He's always wanted to play with Tom Brady. They have a really great relationship on and off the field. He almost joined the Patriots last year, said he would have if Tom was still the quarterback. He wanted to play with Tom and Belichick. He said it multiple times that he wants to play with Tom Brady. This might be his final chance. So if the Bucs are looking and they're serious, now you look at the map around the league too. And you're right. There are some teams, and again, cap space will change as we head into camp and as other players sign and extensions, etc. But right now, you're looking at the teams that could potentially maybe make a play for them. The Packers or the Cowboys, they both have more cap space than the Bucs might have. And those are the teams that I'd maybe look out for as potential, and also obviously the Rams as well, and maybe the Saints,
can't rule them out.
Maybe the Saints as well. So I think if you're stacking up what he'd like to do when it comes to signing after he's recovered from his injury, he's going to have suitors, and he's going to have suitors where he'll probably slide right into the number 2 role. But you have to think, what is going to be more important to him? He's got a ring from last year, so he's not ring chasing. Is that ability to play with a Tom Brady finally, that he's been wanting to do, with a chance to potentially win a Super Bowl, is that weigh more to him than maybe a higher salary? Because, I mean, if you look at what he took last year, there were teams in pursuit of him as well last year, and he only signed a 1-year, $2 million deal, with $500 guaranteed. Now, we had incentives, and he brought the deal up to, $4.75 million, but he signed for pennies on the dollar. I mean, it was cheap. And I bet you that if Antonio Brown pulled the shenanigans before and Chris Godwin got injured before that happened, Odell Beckham Jr. is not going to he's not going to the Rams. He's probably going to the Bucs to play with Tom Brady in this team. There was no openings. There was no need to bring him in. There was no need to compete with anybody. So, I think once he comes back, he's going to know what his market is. He's already probably knows what his market is. If the Bucs are interested, they're probably already communicated, hey, come midseason, whatever you're at, Packers, Kyle, whoever. It's probably, and obviously, the Rams have already opened the door for him, but multiple teams have already reached out to him and said, hey, if you're here at this point of the year, we'll bring you in. So for me, it's all about GM Brady and what he, if he can convince Odell to come here, because you're right, he's going to have bigger opportunities elsewhere. And, signing a contract with some security in Green Bay, or in Dallas, or in maybe not New Orleans, but in with the Rams, those all make more sense than to sign a contract with some term if you're going to the Saints or to the Bucs, where you don't know what necessarily the quarterback situation will be. So it comes down to, how good is Tom at recruiting? We already know he's pretty damn good from the guys we brought in. So
I mean, they call him the ultimate recruiter. Tom Brady is. I mean, he's the greatest of all time in multiple things, and one of them is recruiting players. There's no guarantee that the Bucs can bring Odell Beckham to their team, but one way that you can get Odell Beckham is through Best Ball Mania 3 by drafting him, and you could probably get him for great value because he won't be able to play until that November time. But the beauty of Best Ball Mania 3 is that you don't have to change your lineup week in and week out. It's just set it and forget it. And whoever scores the most points on your team will be up there for your point total that week and throughout the whole season. So Odell, late edition in November, starts putting up numbers, could really help you and your team. The best place to play fantasy football this summer is Underdog Fantasy. Best Ball Mania 3 tournament has $10 million in total prize money. And the best part is you draft your football team and that's it. There's no waivers, no trades, no in-season management. Underdog Fantasy gives you your best score each week of the season. The highest scores at the end of the year win. Last year's champion in Best Ball Mania actually drafted in June. So the sooner that you draft your team, the better. And there's no time like the present to join Underdog Fantasy and take your shot at $1 million draft. Plus, Underdog is going to double your first deposit up to $100 when you sign up with the promo code Pewter. That's 4 free entries into Best Ball Mania 3. So what are you waiting for? Get that great value by drafting some of the unsung heroes, the guys that you won't hear about until later in training camp at the end of this month. Start drafting them now, or take a flyer on someone like Odell Beckham before he signs with the team. And then if he ends up going to the Bucs or the Rams or one of these teams that we mentioned, it's just more bang for your buck. So head to underdogfantasy.com or the App Store and sign up for Underdog with the promo code Pewter and draft your Best Ball Mania 3 team today. Once more, that's Underdog Fantasy, promo code Pewter. Again, promo code Pewter. All right, we got into a lot of different variables here with Odell Beckham. So I'm going to ask you, JC, if you had your choice of Odell Beckham Jr. or Julio Jones on the Bucs, who are you taking? But let's premise it with, because here's the issue when it comes to Julio and Odell. Julio, you could sign right now, and he's going to play from September to the end of the season if he's healthy. Odell, you're not going to get until November. So does that change it for you? Because it changes it for me, definitely. Does it change it for you?
Again, this is a question with so many loaded variables to it, because if you're signing Julio Jones now, if you sign Julio Jones right now, you're pretty much saying that Chris Godwin's not going to be ready. He's not ready for week 1. He's probably going to miss some of the time, I think, because if you're the Bucs, I feel like they have enough confidence in the guys that they have on the roster for someone to step up and take that number 3 interim spot, number 4 spot till Godwin gets back. If you're signing Julio, I think that might be an indictment on why Godwin's not ready yet. So if Godwin is projected to not be ready for week 1, I'm all for signing Julio. I don't think either one. I mean, Julio faced his fair share of injuries last season. I mean, he missed a bunch of games and was mostly ineffective. I mean, he gobbled up some receptions, but as far as churning out yards, that was not the Julio Jones that we know, and it's not the Julio Jones we've known for the last few years. Only had 1 touchdown last year, very minimal production. But again, he still gave you 496 yards on 37 receptions, and that's really all you're asking for out of a number 4 wide receiver. And he hasn't won a ring yet, so that's an interesting scenario. But I think I would rather use that money now to sign, instead of signing Julio for, let's call it $4.5 million. Let's call both of them sign for $4.5 million. Sound good?
Sure. Yeah.
All right. Let's say they both sign for $4.5 million. I'd rather use some of that money now to get a tight end and an outside linebacker, and then for training camp or before the season starts. And then when you start shedding that salary, like if Jose Borregales beats out Ryan Suckup, then that frees up $2 million in cap space. You have a little bit over. You go to Marpet. Not Marpet. He's not here anymore. But he would have taken a restructure if he was here.
He's too skinny. He couldn't even play right now in the NFL if he wanted to, because he lost all that weight.
You go to Mike Evans, or you go to one of these guys, ask him to restructure, open up some cap space, and then you can sign OBJ, have another veteran tight end, have another veteran outside linebacker, edge rusher on the team, and then get OBJ at that price for later in the season. So if it was me and I'm weighing out all the variables, I'm taking OBJ midseason, and I'm taking the help now on offense and defense. If we're just saying straight up Julio Jones versus OBJ, give me still OBJ, because I think Julio Jones' hammies are gone. Everyone wants to hold on to what Julio Jones once was. He's not that player. Would I take Julio Jones? Absolutely, I would take Julio Jones on this team. I think he'd be a great number 4, but I think Odell Beckham Jr., and this might sound weird, would be a better fit in the locker room, be more excited to be here. Like, I'm just excited to be here to play with Tom, and I think that would show up on the field a little bit more. But I think both would be solid, additions to the team. I'd rather use that money for something else now and see if we can open up down the road later for OBJ.
Very well said. And I do agree with you in the terms of, I actually do think Odell would probably be a little bit of a better fit in the Bucs offense with what they have currently.
Outside versatility too.
Yeah, exactly. Than Julio Jones would be. But if I'm looking at this with Odell, not getting him till November and coming off an ACL injury, and I also do agree with you about Bucs should probably allocate their funds to a couple of other positions, like you mentioned with tight end, an outside linebacker. But if we're talking about they have to pick one of these guys, I'm going with Julio Jones. And I understand he's had some injuries and his numbers were down. Even in the amount of time he played, he still did have 1 or 2 of those monster games. And it's not going to be every single week, but you don't need that from Julio. And as we talked about, he's going to be on that pitch count where he doesn't need to be on the field the whole time. So let Mike Evans do his thing. Let Chris Godwin do his thing if he's healthy. And if Chris Godwin isn't healthy, that's where Julio comes in, where he's going to be valuable in September and then could still be valuable in December, even when Chris Godwin's back for a couple of months already. So I still think Julio, while you're not going to get it on a consistent basis, can still give you just that baller game that we've seen in the past. Of course, it's a matter of being healthy, but that's the same with Odell or anyone, really. Just you have to maintain being healthy for an entire season. I also think what's tough with Odell is if you're not getting him until November, what I talked about before with another team has a player that gets injured, now they're in the market for Odell. With Julio Jones, I mean, we haven't even really heard a lot of whispers about Julio Jones, about other teams. Yeah, about other teams being interested in him. So I think it's important to just go and get that now and ensure that you have that depth moving forward. Now, if it was just, hey, it's these two guys, they're healthy, they're ready to go for the season, I would go with Odell. But I have to look at it at the realistic view of Odell's hurt, he's rehabbing, he's got other teams with more interest right now and might not be there as the front runner for the Bucs. So I'm taking Julio Jones, but I do think it is pretty close. And, people are on both sides of the argument here. And I think that shows how, special these players are, or at least were at some point, and what they could do and help the Bucs.
Right. I mean, Julio still has that size. He's lost some speed, obviously.
Yeah.
But he's got that veteran instinct. He knows how to get open. And with Tom Brady throwing the ball over Ryan Tannehill, yes, I hear you chat Ryan Tannehill. I know. Over Ryan Tannehill, I do think there is definitely an upgrade, an uptick in production for Julio Jones. I just happen to trust when people tell me stuff. When Cyril Grayson Jr. says he thinks Chris Godwin's going to be ready by week 1, we need a tight end who can block, and Cole Keith looks great, but we need a veteran tight end who can block, and we need someone to spell JTS and Shaq Barrett or a protective injury, because Anthony Nelson had a great season, but I don't want him in there starting 10 games. I'd rather have Trey Flowers, Jerry Hughes, Justin Houston, Anthony Barr, one of those guys in there, starting those 10 games rather than Anthony Nelson. So, I mean, if I've got to take a choose a choice, I want the help on offense and defense where they need it on the 2. And this will be funny because we'll be talking about depth tomorrow, where I think the Bucs have shallow depth. I'd rather do that than add to a position where I think even if they have to get by with Tyler Johnson as their number 3, or Cyril Grayson steps up and is at number 3, or Jalen Darden takes the leap, is at number 3, I'm more comfortable with those than having to have Julio Jones in there, because I don't think Godwin misses any more than a month. I think if you're the Bucs, you can live without a Julio Jones for a month, and then it just turns back. And we don't know. Julio Jones goes out there and balls out for the first month, and you're like, all right, you're number 4, all right, we paid Gage $10 million, so Gage,
thanks,
you're number
4. Back to the sideline.
Yeah, you're number 4 behind Julio again, and then does that create an issue in the locker room? There's just, not that I think it wouldn't.
Julio Jones, other than Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, Julio Jones has been the most even keel wide receiver that, we've all been lucky enough to watch over the last decade.
You'd have to know what he was getting himself into as well. But,
yeah,
it's a fun debate. It's a fun debate to have. I would be fine with either one of them. I just think that if you're the Bucs right now and you have noticeable spots of weakness on your team that you can use to fill with whatever process, whether that be trade or signing, and then if you need a wide receiver at that point, I just think Brady is too much. I think Brady is too much of a lure. If the Bucs are where we think they're at, maybe 2 losses going into that bye week.
Hopefully.
I just think that it's too much to be able to play with Tom, who you wanted to play with since you've broken into the league. You've said it multiple times on multiple podcasts and shows and this and that. If Tom gives you a call and says, yo, you ready to do this thing? We haven't had this chance to play with each other. This is my last season. I'd love to play with you, man. You want to come down to Tampa Bay and help us win a ring? Odell goes, I want to go back to Matt Stafford in LA, or, Lambeau's nice this time of year. I hear, or you know what? Jurors calling me, and they're offering me $5 million. And then you chime in to Brady's. Leonard Fournette was on the Rich Eisen show and pretty much said that Brady called him when he was up in New England. He's like, what the hell are you doing up there?
Yep.
We talked to Leonard like that. And then he's like, all right, let me call you back. Brady never called him back. It was the Bucs that called Leonard Fournette back with a 3-year, $21 million contract offer. So if Brady makes that phone call and he's like, well, I'm getting like $1.5 million more over from Green Bay, they want me to come in as a number 2. Brady's like, let me call you right back. Jason Light's like, yeah, we want to bring you in for $100 million more. I think OBJ's coming here. I just think it's going to happen. So again, it's one of the fun things to talk about in off season, that we're counting down the days to training camp.
Yeah.
21 days, 3 weeks. Let's go.
I was going to say earlier that it just seemed like Odell just looked more happy playing with the Rams, and understandably, like, the production was better and the team was winning. So that obviously played a part in it, but also he went from living in Cleveland to living in LA. So, there's a big difference there. Yeah. LA is great, but You're going to be in Tampa in November, December, and January. Like, that's a pretty good spot to live. As you said, Lambeau, very cold. You don't need to be there. I can see the allure of Dallas because you do play inside, and sure, you're going to have road games, but so does every team. I see the allure of Dallas, but yeah, I really think for him it would come down to like LA and Tampa, and Tom Brady could be the ultimate X factor for everything else that you just said. So we'll see when it comes to Odell or Julio Jones. I think it could be exciting. You have one more point to make?
Yeah, I just think a big question mark too is where is he living right now? Did he buy a house? Is he living in LA? Is he rehabbing in LA? Because it might just be easier to just say, all right, let's just stay in LA, you know?
Yeah.
But as you just said too, like, I think if it comes down to those two teams and Brady makes that phone call personally to him, which you know he will, and maybe even gets Giselle to call him, who's good friends with OBJ. It's like, OBJ, come to Tampa with us, come play with us, OBJ. You know, maybe that's enough. You know, maybe that's enough. But who knows? We won't find out until halfway through the season, and that's if they don't make a signing with Julio Jones beforehand or another wide receiver.
Exactly, and there is also a possibility that they could just end up going with, you kind of sound like with that accent, a little bit like Adam Sandler in the Zohan. You don't mess with the Zohan. I was getting a little bit of that, but yeah, I mean, the Bucs could go and sign another veteran receiver that isn't Julio Jones or Odell Beckham. We'll see, or stay put. That would not shock me either, especially with some of the other positions, as you talked about, that they might need to get. I want to preview tomorrow's show in just a moment. Before that, though, got to talk about Pin Chasers, which is a great place to be at this time of the year. It's the summer. It's July. It's very hot out there. Pin Chasers has AC, and they have multiple locations with that AC in East Pasco, Zephyr Hills, Midtown, and Veterans. Awesome place to go to with friends or family, whether you want to go during the day, get that AC, or go at night. So many different deals, from all-you-could-eat pizza, all-you-could bowl, $1 Miller Lights, the brunch on the weekends, and the food's very underrated. Pizza's awesome. Chicken tendies is great. Nachos are delicious as well. So go to pinchasers.net, see what type of deals that they have, because they have one for you. You could also book a birthday party there for your kids. They got the arcade there, so your kids can bowl, play video games as well. And we will be having a very fun event going on there later this month, July 23rd. That's Saturday. I believe it'll be from 1 to 3. We're going to get a couple of Bucs players out there, so make sure you join us for that date. Go and see some of your favorite Tampa Bay Buccaneers players. That's right before training camp starts. We'll reveal more information as we get closer to that date. But just, put it on your calendars now. Keep an eye out for it. Put it on your radar. July 23rd, Pin Chasers, Pewter Report, and a Bucs player or two. So keep an eye out for that. And again, go to pinchasers.net. Anthony Peroni, huge Bucs fan, season ticket holder. So you're helping out a fellow Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan. And JC, as you alluded to a little bit earlier, tomorrow's show, myself and Casey Hudson will be on. K Huddy. We're going to talk about the depth of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Where do they have the most depth? Is it at wide receiver, as you see there with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin? Is it at defensive line? Is there another position where you think that if a player or two goes down, the Bucs are best fit to go and still win a game, beat their opponent, whatever it may be? I think there's arguments for a couple of different positions, including the ones that we just mentioned. So that will be tomorrow's show at 4:00. And as we wrap up everything here,
Matt, it's funny. I think the last time we were on together,
Thursday show. This is your third show in a row, the trifecta for you.
Right. But no, I like back in the day, well, not back in the day, but like earlier in the month or whatever, or last month, we did the Pin Chasers read, and my son was there on a field trip.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I remember that.
Guess where my son is today?
He's at Pin Chasers again.
Back at Pin Chasers again.
Awesome. Your son's like the number one customer.
Well, they had the field trip at Pin Chasers. I'm like, oh, that's great. We'll be going there on the 21st, and you go ball again. You probably show me up. They use the big balls. I think we talked about this. Candle pin. Remember we talked about like the small candle pin? Nobody knows what I'm talking about unless you're from Northeast. But we have candle pin. They're small balls, thin pins, and they don't have like the big balls with the holes. It's a completely different thing. If you know what candle pin is, hit me up because it's the best. But yeah, I thought that was hilarious. Like, just
yeah, that timing is so funny. So yeah, it's crazy how things work out sometimes, and hopefully things work out for the Bucs with signing either Odell Beckham or Julio Jones. We'll see. Obviously, we talked a lot about Odell today. So want to thank everyone again in the chats, everyone watching, everyone listening. Make sure you like and subscribe to the Pewter Pulse. Hit that like button, subscribe to our YouTube channel, Pewter Report TV. We got a lot of great content coming up, both on pewterreport.com and on our YouTube channel. So for JC Allen, I'm Matt Matera saying thanks everyone for watching and listening, and we'll see you tomorrow for another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Peace out.
Out.